Okay, so as I was saying, they get me back from where the little triage area is, the desk, into an actual room, and the nurses were great and everything. I explained to them, hey, I'm almost 100% sure my water broke. I'm definitely having some contractions. It was very, very light. The car ride for me to go from the Chinese food restaurant to the hospital was only about 10 minutes. It really wasn't that far, which is actually closer than had I been at home, because home would have been about 20. And I had had a few contractions in the car. Definitely I could feel them in my back, but nothing major. I could tell that liquid was still coming out, but like I said, I had on a pad, so I was good. I get there, they get me back. The nurse I had was awesome, wonderful nurse. I will say, just as a side note, every time I have ever stayed in the hospital there, whether it was for dehydration, whether it was for an infection, whether it was for, previous births, I have never had a bad experience that I can recall. The nurses have always been wonderful, and this was not to exception to that. Wonderful nurses this time around, during labor, after delivery. Just a great experience. I will say, I hear a lot of people fuss about the hospitals in our area, and I will say I've always had a pleasant experience. But anyhow, so I get in there, the nurse is there. She's trying to get me on the machines, on the monitors, so that she can hear the babies, and she's having a little bit of a hard time. Now, granted, we hadn't even checked to see if my water broke yet, but she was trying to get the monitors on. That's usually the first thing they do. And I will say, bless her heart, she came in, and even with help from another nurse who came in a little after she started, it took her roughly about an hour of them trying, just the two of them trying to get the monitors on to hear the babies, and they were not having any success to get both babies. I got there, my water broke, I'm sorry, right at 5:30 p.m., just as a timeline. I got to the hospital at about 5:45, 5:50-ish. By the time I got in the parking deck and actually checked in, because you have to get little stickers to get in the building and everything, by the time I got up to L&D, it was right at 6 o'clock. And by the time they got me in a room, it was about 6:15-ish, and then they put, they gave me the change of clothes to change out what I had on, and it was about 6:20 when she started, 6:25 when she started trying to get me on the monitors. Okay. The new nurse came in on shift at 7, I think, and came in about 7:10. By 7:15, they finally had me on the monitors. So it took them almost an hour to get me on the monitors, which was not their fault. It certainly, that was a problem we've had before with the position of where the babies were. It was trying to get them on the monitors. So when she asked me where I thought the babies were, and I told her, I said, well, last time we checked, they were sideways, and I was pretty sure they were head down, but I wasn't sure because the pressure I had been feeling the last, couple weeks here was different from the pressure earlier in the pregnancy, but, I couldn't really tell what was going on. When she could not get the monitors down below, I knew there was a problem then, and pick up their heart rates where they normally found them. I knew there was going to be an issue. So, they finally get the monitors on. It's after 7. The nurse that was leaving off shift went ahead and checked my cervix and went ahead to make sure and confirm that my water broke. And she checked. She said, yes, your water definitely broke. You're what they call pooling, which is where they can look inside with the speculum and see the liquid is collecting, I guess, at the opening of the cervix. She's like, you're definitely pooling. She said, you're about 2 to 3 centimeters dilated, which I was like, wow, I wasn't sure. Did the water cause me to be 2 to 3, which has happened before in the past, when I've been pregnant, or the water breaking, I'm sorry, or was I 2 to 3 and that's why my water broke? So, we're not real sure. But she's like, you're 2 to 3, your water definitely broke. I was like, okay. So she's like, however, I'm feeling, she said, and I can't tell which part is presenting on the baby. She said, it's definitely not the head. I'm almost 100% sure the baby is breech. And I'm like, oh, just great. So, because breech equals C-section, which I have always been completely against getting a C-section if it's not absolutely necessary. I have a very big problem with what I call invasive procedures across the board, vaccinations that I don't think are necessary, certain things that I just don't think are necessary. I'm very anti, and C-section is one of those, unless it is life or death. So I'm like, okay, great. You pretty much just ruined my whole day by telling me that, but okay, fine. We'll get past it. So she's like, okay, your doctor is not on call this evening. She's like, the other doctor is. And I'm like, what do you mean my doctor's not on call? I was like, call him and let him know I'm here, and so he can come in. And what I did not know, which I was highly disappointed about, is that when your doctor's not there, okay, my doctor's office is just my doctor and his midwife, okay? His midwife, even if she was on call, can't deliver twins. I'm considered high risk, so she can't deliver, which is fine. But the doctor, I was under the impression if he's not there, they just call him and he shows up. No, they don't work it that way, I guess, anymore. Nowadays, if your doctor's not there, they have a doctor who's on call who is rotating on site for all the doctors that are not on call that day. And then on a different day, a different doctor's on call for all the doctors. Well, I didn't know that. So that meant whoever was on call is who was going to deliver. And I'm like, well, that sucks, but okay, fine. I wasn't expecting to deliver right away. So they were like, and it was, 5 o'clock, said 5, well, by the time it was after 7. So they're like, well, we're going to start, okay, let me back up a second. So anyhow, they're like, Dr. So-and-so's on call. So they're like, but Dr. So-and-so's currently in a delivery, but we definitely need to find out if these babies are breech or, what part is presenting. So we're going to have him come in, give us a minute. So they're trying to find an ultrasound machine. They're trying to find somebody who can do an ultrasound, but nobody, I guess, is certified to do an ultrasound right there where they're at without them having to take me down to ultrasound on a different floor, which they really didn't want to do with my water broken. Or they could get the doctor to do it, but they had to wait for him to come in. So fine, they get a hold to the doctor. Doctor comes in, he introduces himself. I had never met him before. Now, I will say I knew who he was. I recognize his name. From my understanding, he's an excellent doctor. I've heard wonderful things about him. He's just not my doctor. He had actually treated me when I went to L&D a couple weeks before, but I never met him. They did a diagnosis over the phone, and he sent in the order for the IV, sent in an order for the antibiotics, so they saw I had a UTI and some other, issues. I was having blood pressure problems. And so they, that was literally 2 weeks ago, maybe 2.5 weeks ago or so, before I went into labor. So, I knew who he was. Like I said, I had heard great things about him. He's just not my doctor, so I'd never met him. So he comes in and he introduces himself. Very nice man. He does a quick cervical check. He says, you're about 2. I'm sorry, the nurse said I was 3. He said I was about 2 to 3. And he says, definitely the head is not presenting. Let me look at the ultrasound. He pulls out the ultrasound machine. Both of the babies are breech. So he turns to me and says, both babies are breech. That means we're going to have to do a C-section, pretty much regardless of whenever you deliver. And of course I'm like, well, can you do inversion? He's like, well, the first baby A, her water's broken. We have to have water to do inversion. Can't do inversion if her water's broken. I said, okay, what if she possibly turns on her own? He says, well, we're going to try to stall labor as long as possible. He said, if she turns on her own, great. He said, but don't hold your breath, pretty much. I'm like, okay. So here we are with someone I don't know telling me that I'm going to have a C-section. Depending upon when they do it, it may be with a doctor I don't know. So he says, your doctor will be here in the morning. So as long as we can hold you off till then, you can at least talk to your doctor and go from there. So I was like, okay, great. And I felt better about the situation. I said, well, at the very least, if I'm going to be forced to have a C-section, at least it'll be my doctor doing it, someone I'm comfortable with, that I'm familiar with. So he says I'm going to order an antibiotic to make sure you don't get infection. I'm going to order magnesium to make sure it slows down the contractions. I'm going to order a steroid shot for the baby's lungs. And I'm going to order Zofran in case you start feeling nauseous from the magnesium. And they start an IV. So I was like, okay, no big deal. He leaves, and, the nurse comes in. She sets me up on everything. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here. This is the end of part 2.